Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome. If you've never been here before, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And so today I'm going to be wrapping up June, all the books that I read. I ended up reading 62 books for the month. If you ever do want more of my thoughts or my review on any of these books, I have my Goodreads always linked in my profile, and I review every single book I read so you can read my full reviews on there. So without further ado, let's get into wrapping up these 62 books. First book that I ended up reading is Ruin by Samantha Towell. I got this one on a book recommendation from Tori from Novel Life. This is a sports romance. The hero is a world-class boxer, and it is a second chance romance between him and his high school sweetheart. She was a Juilliard ballet dancer, and when they broke up, the heroine actually found out she was pregnant just a couple weeks later. The whole time she has assumed that he abandoned them, and she's been left raising their daughter on her own. So it cuts to, I think, 5 years later. He comes back into town and he actually sees her dancing as a go-go dancer at a club, and he's like, hey, what are you doing here? Why are you dancing here? And then the next day he ends up showing up at her house and tries to reconnect with her. And imagine his surprise when she opens the door and he finds out that they have a daughter that he never even knew about. So this ends up being their second chance romance. It's very slow burn because they have a lot of things that they're working through, some miscommunication and stuff in the past. I really liked how it was handled in this one. Their daughter is a big part of the book, and I liked seeing the hero try to get to know his daughter, get into her life. There's a lot of grovel in this one, which was really great, with the hero trying to get back into the heroine's life. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Then after that, I ended up jumping into Rush by Samantha Towell. This is the second book that follows Ruin. So the heroes in both of these books are brothers. And the hero in this one, he is an NFL quarterback. He's always had the perfect reputation, and so it's his romance with the heroine, who ends up being his head coach's daughter. The heroine, she has had some struggles in the past. She is a sober alcoholic. She went to rehab. She had a DUI and a bunch of things go on in her past, and so she's trying to get her life back together. And so her dad gave her a job with the team. And so on her first day of her job, she ends up running into the hero in the locker room. And so they both kind of have this chemistry right away. But as soon as he finds out who she is, he kind of shuts down and tries to ignore her because he doesn't want anything to do with her. Kind of knows about her messy past and doesn't want anything to do with that. Kind of rude to her in the beginning, which we find out that his father is actually an alcoholic and continuously says he's going to do better and falls back off the wagon. And so he's kind of dealt with that his whole life and doesn't really believe the heroine, or he kind of misjudges her in the beginning. And so these two actually end up becoming friends first, and then it's their slow burn romance. The heroine, she's kind of very lonely in her life, and the hero of this and his family, they're all really close, and I liked seeing how they kind of brought her into the fold. So yeah, I gave this one also 4 stars. Next, I read The Reluctant Hero by Lorraine Heath. This is one of her Western historical romance novellas. The hero is a grumpy sheriff, and one day the heroine shows up in town, and she is a dime novel writer. And she's kind of lost her muse, so she comes to town because she really wants to find a new hero material to write about, and she actually wants to use the hero as her inspiration. So he kind of continuously tells her no, I'm not hero material, leave me alone, get away from me. And eventually he does end up relenting and promises her, one day you can shadow me and see what my life is about and what it's like being a sheriff in this small town, and that's all you're gonna get. So yeah, this novella is very short. It follows them just that one day when she's kind of shadowing him on the job. Love that grumpy hero pairing with that outgoing, sunshiny heroine. There's not a lot of angst in this one since it is novella length. I actually found myself wanting a little bit more from this. I wanted more time with the characters, but in classic Lorraine Heath fashion, we get some twists and turns in there as well. But yeah, otherwise this one was pretty short and sweet, and I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read Sweet Berries, which is the second book in the Cambric Creek series, which follows, the first book was Morning Glory Milking Farm. So in this one, the heroine is a divorcee, and she is working at a U-Pick style farm. And one day the hero, who is a Mothman, he ends up finding her when he's coming to the farm to look for blackberries. So this one had a lot of fun, sweet, and sexy moments. The summer is hot, those berries are ripe, and the heroine is super randy. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So the next book I read is The Christie Affair. I grabbed the audiobook of this one from my library. It was a historical fiction mixed with some mystery elements. This one kind of follows the true story of Agatha Christie, the writer. She ended up disappearing for a week and a half back in the 1920s. The story jumps back and forth with Agatha Christie's disappearance and kind of what she was up to, and then also with the other woman who ends up being the woman that her husband wants to leave her for. So this one ended up being okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. I wasn't really a fan of the jumping back and forth between the stories. I just found myself wanting to stick with the mystery elements of what happened to Agatha Christie instead of following this other woman's journey. But otherwise, this was a really quick, easy listen, very compulsive read, and yeah, I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I just discovered this author like last year, so I read Station 11, and then her newest book this year was Sea of Tranquility, and really loved those. This book as well kind of exists in that same world as those books, and she kind of writes like science fiction, literary fiction. I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read an arc of Found by the Lake Monster by Lillian Lark. This is the 3rd book in her Love Bathhouse Monstrous Matches series. In this one, the heroine is a human woman and the hero is the lake monster. So one night the heroine is out with a group of other people and they're trying to search for the lake monster. And then she ends up happening across the hero. The hero, he at first assumes the heroine is his date for the night. And the hero is actually in his last heat, so kind of his biological clock is ticking with the last chance for him to produce any offspring. And so he went to the matchmaker, which is the heroine of the 1st book in the series, and asked her to set him up with like the chance of going on a date with somebody and maybe like breeding and having children together. When he happens across the heroine, he assumes she is his date at first. These two end up hitting it off right away. Their romance was super sweet. It just takes place like over that one night. Eventually, he does realize that she isn't who she said she was in the beginning. And yeah, but they both have this connection. And so they end up seeing where it goes anyways. This book does include breeding, nodding, eggs, and of course, fertility discussions. But I gave this one 5 stars, loved it. This whole series is one of my favorite monster romance series. Next, I read Falls Boys, which is the 1st book in Penelope Douglas's new Hellbent series. This series is a spin-off series from the original Fallaway series, which I read about like 4 years ago when I first discovered Penelope Douglas books and devoured like the entirety of their backlist. So this one is kind of a wrong sides of the track, opposites attract situation between the hero and the heroine. The heroine comes from like a really bad past and kind of like a rougher home situation. She meets the hero Hawk, who's actually from the original series. He is Jackson and Juliet's son. So yeah, due to some like misunderstandings or like the situation they get themselves in, they end up escaping together. They find out they have like warrants out for them and they end up hiding in like one of his secret lairs. And so it's kind of their forced proximity, very slow burn in this one. There is like a whole mystery element as well, which hopefully will be followed up in the rest of the series. I really had a good time with this read. I love the nostalgia of like being back in Shelburne Falls, which is the town where this, whole series takes place. I liked seeing the original couples as parents, and seeing all the nods to their books was fun. I liked being at the Loop again, which is where they do like their racing and things. Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read A Bride for the Prize Fighter. So in this one, the heroine, she lives with her father, who's a schoolmaster, and he ends up growing ill. On his deathbed, he actually tells her that, hey, you actually have this half-brother living, and he's going to be coming to, like, take control of your life. And so her brother is a Viscount and she leaves with him, and she's hoping like, I've always worked in the school with my father, so like hopefully I can find a job as a governess. Along the way, her brother is pretty drunk when he picks her up, and they end up stopping at an inn where he's like, hey, actually instead, like, halt those governess plans. You're actually gonna marry the prize fighter here who owns the inn. And so her brother actually has like land and a house that the hero, her husband to be, supposed to inherit. And so her brother tells the hero like, hey, if you want that land and the house still, the way to do that is to marry my sister as well. So in this one, the hero is like very cold, very straightforward type of person. He definitely comes off like a bit brutish and unfeeling towards the heroine. And since both of them were kind of thrust into this arranged marriage that neither of them wanted, I liked seeing how they explored that. The hero is the type that he doesn't say much, but he shows how he feels with his actions. And so he owns a pub, and so one of the times he actually converts like one of the private pub rooms into, instead, he converts the whole thing, like gets some of his late mother's items out of storage and like decorates the entire room to be the heroine's private parlor. Like he goes out of his way and like picks up like really expensive, luxurious fabric for her to make bedroom curtains out of, because he knows like the light outside and the noise is bothering her. And so we get to see just a lot of these little like domestic moments happening between them. Heroine in the beginning, she's like very prim and proper. She came from this very like sheltered and naive kind of life. Over time with the hero, she ends up breaking out of that kind of like buttoned up vibe that she has, and she gets to like be strong and smart, ask questions. She's not afraid to like get in there and push and pull with the hero. This was a really fun and different historical romance because it's like a working class couple. I just liked seeing this and all of the like domestic moments in their life. I definitely wanted a little bit more with the romance in this one. We do get steamy times, but I wanted some more of that romance development. But yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next up is Since the Surrender by Julianne Long. This is the 3rd book in her Pennyroyal Green series. There's the step back on that. So I have been slowly making my way through this series. This one is kind of a second chance-ish moment between the couple. So the hero is an English war hero. He was a captain, and he actually knew the heroine in the past as her late husband was his commanding officer at one point. Now both of them are single, and it's been a couple years since the war, since her husband's death. And she reaches out to him because she needs help finding her sister who has disappeared. So they end up spending a lot of time together while they're trying to find her sister. And there's just a lot of like built up tension and angst between this couple. Mystery plot with the whole sister's disappearance kind of took me a bit to get into. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Next, I ended up reading Blindside by Candy Steiner. I had an arc of this one, but it is out now. All of Candy's books you can read on Kindle Unlimited. This book exists in the same world as her Fair Catch book, which was also released earlier this year. They're both sports romances that revolve around college football. So in this one, the hero is one of the college football players, and the heroine actually works for PR for the team. So when the hero kind of goes off during one of his media interviews, the heroine steps in because she's like, hey, do you need help? Like, what's going on with you? Finds out that he was recently broken up with his high school girlfriend. So he's kind of heartbroken and just not feeling, that great. And so she's supposed to meet with him to kind of go over like some PR guidelines and kind of get him back on track to, doing good interviews. So when they meet at the coffee house, he notices that she's kind of crushing on the coffee house musician who's there. He has a proposition for her, and he's like, hey, since you're kind of crushing on this guy and he's not noticing you, and like you obviously don't know what you're doing to like get the guy's attention, how about we fake date? Guys will show interest in you when somebody else is like paying attention to you, and then it will help me get my girlfriend back and show her that she still wants me. So it ends up becoming their fake dating romance, which then turns into some like seduction lessons, which was super fun. The heroine in this, she is bookish, she wears glasses, she has her own bookshelves in her apartment. The hero at some points, he actually grabs some of her books, checks out her like annotations, and decides to act out some of those moments with her, which was fun to see. This one 4 stars. Next, I read Devi's Distraction by Ruby Dixon. This is book 7 in the Ice Home series, which is a spin-off from the Ice Planet Barbarians series. So I loved this one. The heroine is actually a scientist, so I loved her fascination with like plants and animals and just like all the happenings going on in the planet. And the hero in this one, he is from the Strong Arm clan, and he's actually missing a leg. He's tired of people kind of pitying him and always having to be carried around by others. And so he actually goes to the heroine because he's like, hey, who's the smartest woman here? Like, I need somebody's help. And so they all direct him to her. He goes to her and he's like, hey, I need help. Like, I want to walk. So she ends up trying to design like a prosthetic leg for him. So I loved seeing these two together. They become friends first. He's kind of thinking like he's going to be resonating soon. So he approaches her and is like, hey, what do women like? What are human women into? And while he's asking her questions, he discovers that he actually wants to know more of what she's into and like what her answers would be. And I just really loved seeing these two together. They're very sweet. The resonance for this couple ends up coming a lot later in the book, which was a nice change. And I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Next, I read an arc of Give Me More by Sara Cate. This is the 3rd book in her Salacious Players Club, but this book is out already now. Love this entire series. It centers around a group of friends who own a kink club, and their club is named the Salacious Players Club, and it's kind of a BDSM style kink club where the members can live out any of their fantasies. This is a MMF romance between a married couple and the couple's best friend. This one had a lot of heat, a lot of steam, but also a lot of heart to it and a lot of emotions for this entire like throuple. And I loved seeing them together. This is probably my favorite in the series so far. Like, this series just keeps getting better. I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I read The Hacienda. This was one of my Book of the Month books. I love this gorgeous, like very moody cover. So this one, if you love books like Mexican Gothic, Rebecca, The Haunting of Hill House, definitely check this one out. This one is like a gothic, gory mystery thriller. It's very like chilling and atmospheric at times, set in the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence. I just love books like this. I love the other books like Mexican Gothic, Rebecca, and The Haunting of Hill House. I love books where the house is just as much of a character as the characters are in the book. So this one had those same vibes. The second half of it was a little more lackluster for me than the beginning half, so I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Next up, I read Nadines Champion, which is book 8 in the Ice Home series by Ruby Dixon. And in this one, the hero is a clone and he's very competitive. His like being the best at everything was honestly kind of playful and fun in this one and a little bit charming. This couple resonance comes a lot later for them, actually during the middle of like a dangerous situation. But they ended up becoming friends first and actually pleasure mates before that. This one was okay for me. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I read Calis Catastrophe, which is book 9 in Ruby Dixon's Ice Home series. The couple in this one, they end up resonating immediately when they first see one another, but they put it off for a super long time, like months. They actually end up making themselves sick and like woozy and dizzy from putting off resonance for so long, which was interesting to see play out in this world. This one, the hero just can't understand why the heroine doesn't give in to resonance right away and be a couple with him. So he actually ends up kidnapping her and taking her away so they have like a little secluded time. Because if we're together, like she'll see that like we're meant to be. Like I'm a sucker for the world building and things happening in this world in this entire series. I liked having the heroes share some of the stories of like the ancestors of the planet and just kind of all the things going on this world. Ended up being okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I read My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. I ended up picking this one up on release week. I was planning to love it. I've been reading Tessa Bailey's books for multiple years, but sadly this one was a major miss for me. If you've seen my mid-year book freakout tag, this was actually one of my most disappointing reads of the year. So this one is described as a spicy, steamy / cozy murder mystery. And in this, the heroine, she is a school teacher and she's on vacation at Cape Cod with her brother. And on their first day checking in to the rental home that they're going to be staying at, they end up finding a dead body. Heroine, she thinks that she can like totally contribute to the investigation. The hero comes along. He's actually a bounty hunter who was hired to take on the case as well. This book was just not it for me. It's very insta-lust, which I've read plenty of books and novellas like that in the past, but this one just didn't work for me. The hero is a bit gruff and grumpy, and like as soon as he steps off his motorcycle, he is super into the heroine. Honestly, both of them, like how quickly they couldn't keep their hands off one another, and kind of just the extreme like dirty talk right off the bat was just kind of cringe to me in this one. He's just instantly possessive of her, instantly stealing items from her suitcase, and just very like, it came out of nowhere. Like it just felt like a lot with like no build up for these characters. I didn't really even get to know the characters very well before they're just like super into one another. The whole mystery element of this was super lackluster, and I just didn't really care how crazy these two were for getting it on with one another. Next, I read Parting Gifts by Lorraine Heath. I will show the ebook cover for this one as well. And this one was really great. So I've been working my way through Lorraine Heath's backlist, and this is one of her like beginning Western historical romances. In this book, it starts off the heroine, Maddie. She has been going through a lot. She's been selling clothes off of her back, like to get shelter and food, and she's just kind of at the end of what she can offer up. So she ends up at a brothel and auctioning off her virginity for a place to live. While she's up on the stage trying to auction off her virginity, Charles is there, and he is a widower. He has 3 children, and he ends up buying Maddie. He can tell she's like super uncomfortable up there and doesn't want her having to sell off her body. So he's like, hey, instead, why don't you marry me? Come back to my inn that I own, help me run it, and help take care of my 3 children. In exchange, like, I just want your friendship. I want a platonic, like kind of companionship marriage. So she goes for it, and then they head back to his inn where she ends up meeting his brother Jesse, who is actually the hero of this book. So this one is definitely a little bit messy and angsty. We know from the blurb on the back of the book, as well as from Charles and Jesse's point of views in the book, that Maddie's husband Charles is actually dying. And so his dying wish is to provide his children with a mother to look after them and take care of them. And that's why he married Maddie. She doesn't find out until a lot later into the book what's going on, but she ends up having this kind of like emotional connection with his brother Jesse. So yeah, if cheating of any kind is not your jam, probably don't pick up this book. For me personally, it doesn't bother me, especially in the case of this book where they're in a platonic relationship that they both know, and yeah, with everything else going on in this book as well. But yeah, this one is definitely emotionally hitting. Gave this one 5 stars. I read an arc of Princess and the Player. This is the 2nd book in a standalone series. This book doesn't come out until November 8th, but is a sports romance. So in this one, the couple end up sharing a passionate night together at a sex club. She is there because it is the day of what was supposed to be her wedding, when her fiance actually ended up cheating on her and leaving her. And so she's there celebrating with friends, and she's at a masquerade ball dressed in her wedding gown. And then the hero is also there. He is a football player, and he's there with his teammates celebrating his 35th birthday. So they end up sharing like a passionate, steamy one night together. They go their separate ways. They don't exchange names or anything. Then a few weeks later, they end up running into one another and kind of recognize each other. They realize that they live in the same building. He's actually lives on the penthouse of the apartment building she lives in. So this book also, it says it in the synopsis, so I knew about it going in, but it is a surprise baby trope. One ended up being okay for me. The first book in the series was just okay as well. This author is kind of hit and miss for me. This series sadly has been a miss for me as well, and I probably won't be picking up any more from this series, but I gave this one 3 stars. Next up, I read Where Dreams Begin by Lisa Kleypas. This is the gorgeous cover, and then this is the pretty step back for this one. This one, the hero is a self-made man, which we know Lisa Kleypas is the queen of self-made man heroes. Hero Zachary, he has kind of gone as far as money and fortune can take him, and he really wants to be able to dip into society. So he ends up reaching out to the heroine Lady Holly, and he wants to hire her as kind of like his society teacher, like to teach him the ways of polite society and like get him an in with the ton. And so one of his rules is that she has to come and live with him at his house, and to bring her daughter as well, because he wants help for himself as well as his sister and his mother. I ended up really loving this one. I loved that forced proximity of them living in the house together. I liked seeing the heroine form a relationship with his sister and mother. The hero is super sweet with the heroine's daughter. I just loved seeing the hero in this one. He's actually the pining hero who wants the heroine like so badly. But yeah, this is a really fun one. I gave this one 5 stars, and it is a standalone from Lisa Kleypas. Next, I read an arc of The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. This one comes out on July 19th. I've read a couple other books by this author. I read Mexican Gothic and then The Gods of Jade and Shadow. I loved both of those ones. I was excited for this new book. So this is a historical fiction, kind of science fiction retelling of the island of Dr. Moreau. Instead, this reimagining is set against 19th century Mexico. So the main character is the daughter of Dr. Moreau, as the title suggests, and she has always helped her father with like his science experiments. So he's doing like, if you don't know the original storyline, the doctor is into like animal human hybrids. This one was just very compulsive read. Like I had to keep reading. I wanted to know what was going to happen next. Just liked the exploration of like human and nature and mortality in this one. So this one also had some super interesting like historical elements with the history of the Maya people. There's also like the discussions of how slavery and colonization has affected the area. And there's just this war brewing between classes during that time frame in Mexico. I think the pacing and the development of the story wasn't as great as it was in the beginning, so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Next, I read Wicked Beauty by Cate Robert. This is the 3rd book in her Dark Olympus series. And this whole series has been like a Greek mythology retellings, kind of set in this sort of urban fantasy contemporary type setting. And this one is an MMF romance with kind of also weaved in some competition style games going on. The first book in this series, Neon Gods, actually still remains my least favorite of the series, but I'm so glad I continued on because book 2 and then the novella that came out and this 3rd book I have really enjoyed. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next, I read Parallel by Elizabeth O'Rourke. I really loved this one. It is a soulmates style time travel romance. And so in this one, the heroine Quinn, she has always lived her whole life, like always having these other visions, other dreams of this entire other life that she lives. Like even back when she was 4 years old, her parents took her to a therapist because they were like, why is our daughter waking up in the night and going on about her husband Nick and like how she needs to get back to him. Her whole life she's kind of dealt with that and kind of known things she shouldn't know and just always has these dreams. She's kind of grown out of it, but then she's also kind of just not shared it with the people around her anymore. And so in the beginning of the story, she starts like passing out and stuff, and so her fiance and mom get worried because when she wakes up, she actually doesn't even recognize them at first, and she thinks she's supposed to be with Nick in like this other life. So they end up taking her to the hospital, and then in walks in Dr. Nick, which yes, that Nick from her dreams. He's been kind of actually loosely dreaming about her as well. And the more time she ends up spending around him, she actually sees more and more dreams and memories of this like other life. Ends up becoming their story. Both of them are in a relationship with other people when this story kicks off. Some great angst and tension. This one actually leaves on a cliffhanger, so I have book 2 ready to go after. And I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Then I jumped right into the next book in the series, which is Intersect. And this one, again, carries on from the first book, so I don't want to say too much, but it is a time travel, soulmate style romance. There are actually 4 books in this series, and the first 2 books are a duet, and then the second 2 books are a duet. And so all the stories actually do connect, and at the very end, we do come back to the beginning of the series. And yeah, I really like this one too. I gave it 4 stars. And next, I took a break and jumped into some audiobooks. So I read A Flicker in the Dark, which is a thriller. So this one was super easy to consume and read. Nothing really new or exciting happening in the story, but I'd still recommend it for a quick thriller read. So this one is a Louisiana setting, and the heroine is a psychologist whose father is actually locked up for murders that he committed like 20 years in the past. And so when more teenage girls end up going missing, again, similar to the case that her father was having in the past, the main character, she can't help comparing that to things from her past, and like a lot of that starts getting brought up. So yeah, this one was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. And I listened to this Audible original, Crimes of Passion by Jack Carbon. Read a couple books by this author, and so I was excited to try out this audio. This one was a great time. It's an MM romance. Both heroes in this, they are true crime podcasters. So both of them have always kind of had a hateful banter because they're kind of like rivals. When one of their long-term fans ends up passing away, her mother comes to them and was like, hey, she would have loved if you guys would have ever like worked together or done some episodes together. So they decide to do that. They're going to collab together and do a couple podcasts together. So it was a lot of fun. I love the snippets in this of their podcast. We get a lot of like on-air banter between them. The whole production of this was just really well done. Yeah, this one is short. It's kind of novella length, and I gave it 4 stars. So I jumped into The Breakup Artist, also an Audible original. Heroine in this one, she has a secret job where she pins letter as the breakup artist, where she helps other people write breakup letters to their soon-to-be exes. And she also has a lot going on with like complicated feelings toward her new stepmother. So her father ended up jumping into a relationship and remarrying just 6 months after her mother passed away. And then to make matters worse, the woman he ends up remarrying, her new stepmom, is her same age, and they were actually like college rivals. She has all that going on, and then she actually ends up dating one of the breakup-ees that she wrote a letter to on behalf of his ex. He doesn't find out, of course, until later into the book. This one did have some cute and sweet moments, mostly revolving around the hero. He wants to own his own coffee roastery, and so he has a lot of like coffee puns. He actually reads romance books, so he loves Immortals After Dark by Cressley Cole. The heroine, on the other hand, I wasn't really a fan of her. She felt very immature, just a bit too much at times. I do think her character did grow as the story went on, but I just wasn't a fan of her. Yeah, this one was short though. It's novella length, and I gave it 3 stars. And I jumped back into the parallel series, and I picked up book 3, which is Across Time. And so you meet the characters that this book and book 4 are going to follow at the end of book 2. So I don't want to say too much about it, but book 3 and 4 do connect with book 1 and 2. When we are back in like World War II France. Again, it's going to leave off on a cliffhanger to have you jump right into book 4. But yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. And I read the final book in the series, or what's put out right now. So this is Across Eternity, book 4 in the parallel series. Like I was saying, book 3 leaves off on a cliffhanger, and so you jump into book 4 and it picks up from there. This is again during like World War II, France, like 1938. This book actually didn't really work for me. I really enjoyed the first 2 books in the series a lot more than I did the last 2 books. I'm not really a fan of World War II set stories as it is, so that was already like a hard sell for me. And then this book, it just felt like I was watching like this plane just slowly spiraling down, like all this drama, all this trauma, all this turmoil, like just kept going down, down, down until it crashed. Like that's how I felt with this book. While book 3 had more swoony, sweet, angsty moments with a romance, book 4, I felt like, is this even a romance? This one, I just had a hard time with the characters and with their choices. I felt like they were making really bad choices. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of other woman drama. A lot of sad moments in this, which honestly didn't get better for a few of the times. Also just more drama, more bad choices, more death, more war, killing sprees, people trying to stay alive during war times. It was just like a whole lot of drama and turmoil. There wasn't a lot of happiness in this for the characters or even for the romance. So this book honestly just felt more love story during war times with time travel and bittersweet romance. So yeah, definitely not my favorite in the series. I think the series started off strong and kind of went downhill for me, and this book I ended up giving 2 stars. So next I read A Lady for a Duke, which is by Alexis Hall. This is a new historical romance that just came out. This book has a trans heroine, and it is her romance with her best friend. So the hero in this one, he is pretty sad for losing his best friend in the war, and he came back from the war with scars, and he has a cane now, he has some injuries, and so he's kind of taken to hiding out at his home. He's become pretty reclusive. So the heroine, Viola, she hears about this and she decides that she wants to go and visit him and make sure that he's okay. So she goes, she's like a lady's companion now. So it ends up being their romance. This is a very character-driven story, not a whole lot of plot, but it was really beautifully done. Just a really tender and touching story. Yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I ended up reading Muscles and Monsters by Ashley Bennett. I actually got this as a recommendation from Tiff Talks Pages. She was reading it and she had heard about it from Caitlin, the love librarian. So the heroine in this, she is a curvy bakery shop owner. One day she is super excited because she's tasked with making the wedding cake for the first like monster human wedding in town. The way to getting the wedding cake to her car, her muscle cramps up and she ends up dropping one of the tiers of the cake. So the hero, who is actually a wolf, he runs across the street to help her because he owns the local fitness gym. And this one was just really cute and sweet. I loved seeing them start working out together. He tries to help her learn how to like weight lift. These two were just like perfect for one another. They were sweet and compassionate, and I loved seeing their romance together. This one is, of course, the human heroine wolf hero pairing. There's primal play in this one. There's mating bites. There's praise kink. And then, of course, there is some full moon activities. Yeah, I loved this one. I definitely want to check out more from the author in the future, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next up is Blindsided by Amy Dawes. I ended up listening to the audio of this one. I'd grabbed this during one of Audible's recent audiobook sales. This was my first book by this author. Hero is a Scottish footballer, and then is his romance with his best friend, the heroine. The heroine decides she wants to lose her virginity before she turns 30 and also find a date to their friend's wedding. The hero steps in to kind of help and be her love coach, since she needs like all the help and advice for dating. And so when she also confides in him that she is a virgin, he decides that you should be with me first because you should have your first time with somebody who like cares and respects you. So then it turns into their, well, that went well, so like let's have a whole month of doing this because obviously we can walk away and still be friends. So this one ended up being okay for me. I'm really particular about the type of humor I like in my reads, and this one just didn't hit well for me. I didn't like the style of humor that was used. The heroine just comes off very, very naive about just sex in general. That she calls it the sex was just like kind of cringe at times. But yeah, I ended up giving this one, I think, 2.5/3 stars. Next, I read June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. This is her newest book, and this one is a contemporary, and not very dark, but it has very emotional aspects to the story. So this one, I just binged it in a day and just had so many thoughts and feels while reading this. I cried a ton during this one towards the end. It's a really beautiful story. This book spans years with the couple. The hero, like it starts when he's 6 years old, and we get tons of coming of age moments for him and the heroine. They end up being raised together, but they're not related. Her family took him in because of some things that went down in his past, which you hear about at the beginning of the story. So yeah, it has some of those forbidden, angsty feels. Yeah, I just loved all the time with this couple and the choices that they make. I just love this one, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I read Raised by Tilly Cole. This is the first book in her Scarred Soul series. It's been on my TBR for years, and I finally got to it. This is a dark contemporary romance. This is kind of set in the cage fighting slash like mafia, bratva world. The hero was kind of kidnapped, and he has been forced to take drugs and just fight to like the death. This one does have a lot of content warning, fighting to the death, multiple murders, rape for both main characters, abuse, captivity, being drugged, abuse of a child. So yeah, this one was super heavy. I actually just thought it ended up being okay, but like take that with a grain of salt because honestly, most of the books from this author haven't really worked for me. I haven't really found one that I loved. I gave it 3 stars, but to be fair, this author's other books haven't really been for me either, so I'm thinking like her writing and storytelling just isn't my cup of tea. So if you've enjoyed maybe her other books, you probably will like this one. Next, I read a couple novellas from Sara Cate. If you sign up for her newsletter, you get 2 freebie novellas, so those are the next 2 that I read. First one was The Naughty List. It's a fun holiday novella with age gap. The heroine in this one is 19, the hero is 40. It has a little of forbiddenness just because he is her new step uncle. As in the heroine's mom remarried, and so her new stepdad, the hero is the stepdad's step brother. So they're not related. In this one, they meet when their families are spending Christmas together, and both the hero and the heroine are kind of anti-Christmas, and they're not really feeling the holiday spirit like the rest of the family, so they sneak off a lot together. So in this one, they definitely do move fast, and it happens in just like a short little weekend, but it all felt really believable to me. I liked the chemistry and connection. Even some of the conversations they were having about like the heroine's life and some of her choices, he helps her out with that. This was just exactly what I wanted at the right time, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read F Roses, also by Sara Cate. This is another novella that you get when you sign up for the author's newsletter. On this one, the heroine was on a popular dating reality show, and she ends up not getting a rose. She gets dumped in the final episode. She's back and feeling a little bit sad, and she's in her hotel room right after that like decision went down. A storm is coming, and so she ends up holed up in the room with a cameraman on the crew. This one is very short. It's like 50 pages or so. It takes place like in just a couple days. One is a bit messy, but they bounce right back out of it and into each other's arms. This one was just okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read Handsome Devil by Sara, Cate. So in this one, the heroine finds out that her best friend is getting married in Las Vegas, and she's like, I need you to come and be here with me. But the only problem is that there are like a ton of storms happening and all flights have been canceled. Her best friend ends up telling her that her dad is also coming and he's going to be road tripping and that they should travel together. So this ends up being the heroine and her best friend's dad romance with like a road trip situation, which is a lot of fun. So in this one, we have age gap. He's 39, she's 21. The hero is British and he's a doctor surgeon. And then the heroine, she is convinced that she's like bad at dating and she wants to explore more of her sexuality, and so she asks the hero for help on the car ride. And this one, I just loved all of the road trip shenanigans, the road trip playlist, the gas station snacks and stops along the way, the dive bars, and of course the sharing of one bed at some of the motels that they stop at. They even sleep in the car one of the nights, and there's some super steamy times there. Once they do get to Vegas, it kind of went downhill for me for the story, but yeah, I enjoyed the road trip aspect of this one, and I gave it 3.5/4 stars. Next, I read Darling Girl. This is a Peter Pan reimagining. It is an adult fantasy. I went into this one with kind of like lowered expectations. I was hearing some like mixed reviews and some bad reviews, but then I was super surprised because I actually ended up really liking it, which I don't know if that's because I lowered my expectations or if it just was a really great book. So this one has like fantastical magical elements. It is a darker Peter Pan story that's set in modern day. In this one, the heroine is Holly Darling, and she is the granddaughter of Wendy. And Holly is a scientist and she works for like a skincare company. So when the story starts, she has actually lost her husband and one of her twin sons in an accident, and she has her one remaining teenage son living at home with her. And then she actually also has like a secret daughter who has been living in a coma, like in a care home for quite a few years. She gets a call saying that her daughter has disappeared one day from the room. Her daughter has a super rare case where she has accelerated aging. Yeah, there's like some interesting things going on with this one. Definitely dark, definitely interesting, like the whole how blood comes into play of the Darling family. So yeah, this one was interesting. It kept me intrigued. I gave it 3.5/4 stars. Next, I read Free to Love by Kennedy Ryan. This is a super short novella that she gave out for free on Juneteenth. So in this one, the heroine is a special needs teacher and the hero is a trainer for the NBA. So the story, we already jump in. They're a couple and they're engaged, and the heroine is kind of overwhelmed with everybody else, including her mother-in-law to be, taking over the wedding and kind of making it into this bigger production than she wanted it to be. So she's kind of just stressing out and like not happy with how things are going. I just read everything that Kennedy writes. So even though this was a short read, she just is a like master storyteller and puts in so much emotion and feeling of these characters. Like I feel like I really knew them. She has a way of delivering such like richness and layers to her characters and their journey. If I could say anything about this one, it's like maybe that I'd want it to be a full length book just because I love Kennedy's writing, but otherwise I really enjoyed this one and gave it 5 stars. Next, I read The Rule of Always, another novella from Kennedy Ryan. This one, Callie is the heroine, and she has wanted Dr. Israel Hammond, who's like a social activist and writer. She has wanted him for like years. So they actually met back when he was her professor at college and she was his TA. But he kind of always put her off. He's 15 years older, and so we cut to 5 years later. So we first met Iz and Callie in the Grip trilogy, and so at the beginning of this book, Iz is at a book signing and reading event with Grip, who they wrote a book together. So Callie shows up at the event and she is not ready to let Iz walk away from her this time. So I loved how much she wanted him and was not afraid to tell him. And of course, we also get catch-ups with Grip and Bristol and their children, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, this one was a super short read and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was my first read from this author. I had heard good things about this book in particular. It is an opposites attract, small town kind of contemporary romance. This one, I will say, kind of threw me off. I wasn't expecting it to be closed door, so that kind of, made me feel a certain way. And I wasn't expecting that. I don't know if that's the author's usual style, but yeah, this was my first book from her, so yeah, it threw me off. On this one, the heroine is an ER doctor, and she comes from like a super prestigious family in the medical world, and she just got out of an abusive relationship. And so she is on her way home from a funeral and has some car trouble, and the hero ends up coming into the ditch and saving her. And then he ends up inviting her back to his home for some grilled cheese. So she takes him up on that, and they have like a little one night stand. Next morning, she wakes up and she can't believe she got with this man who is a decade younger than her. And yeah, she sneaks off because she's like, I'll never be back in this small town. And she heads back to the big city. Then she kind of can't stop thinking about him and sneaks off back to the small town to have another little fun night with him. I really loved the hero in this one. He was super down to earth and just charming and sweet. He just doesn't think he's good enough for the privileged, more wealthy lifestyle that the heroine is used to. He works as like the B&B owner as well as like part-time carpenter. This one was cute. It had some fun and sweet moments, but not a favorite for me, and probably not the author for me. So I gave this one 3 stars. Next up, I read Broken Miles, the first book in the Miles family series by Claire Kingsley. I had read this author's Dirty Martini Running Club in the past, like a couple years ago, and so I had been wanting to read more and heard about this book. This one is a small town romance that takes place in central Washington, and the entire family owns a winery, and each of the siblings of that get a book. And this one is a second chance between a divorced couple. So the hero, he is like a workaholic, and he has left the family and he works as a CFO in like a super fancy San Francisco company. And one night he gets a call from one of his younger brothers and is like, hey, you need to come back to the farm because mom and dad are about to lose it. Like, we need your help. So he picks up and goes back immediately. And then when he's there, he runs into his ex-wife because she still works for the family's winery. These two were high school sweethearts. They ended up eloping when they were in college. But then when the story kicks off, they have been divorced for 4 years. So now they're kind of thrown back around one another, and they realize they still have feelings for each other, and so it's their romance. And I thought this one was an okay start to the series. You meet all of the siblings who of course get books as well, and I gave this one 3 stars. Next, I read Forbidden Miles, the second book in the Miles series. This one is a brother's best friend romance. So the heroine, she is the baby of the Miles family, and it is her romance with one of her brother's roommates slash best friends. He has been in her life for her entire life. While she actually crushed on him when she was like growing up and a teen, he's actually always pretended that like she doesn't exist, because to him, he's like, she is off limits. Like, I can never see her like that, so I'm just gonna pretend she's not even there. And now she ends up moving back home from college, and they kind of have a little push and pull moment, and they end up kissing. Yeah, this one was a pretty easy relationship. I would say this series is pretty low angst, which for me isn't really my favorite thing to read. And most of the drama in this book came from the heroine's brother not being happy with their relationship. And this one just ended up being okay for me as well. There was a lot of telling instead of showing with this series, with like the relationship of the couple, that I think if we would have seen these moments building up their relationship, it would have helped me believe their love. But yeah, this one ended up being 3 stars for me. Next, I read Amira Minted. Is a follow-up to her book last year, which was A Spindle Splintered. So this series is kind of like fractured fairy tales meets multiverse. So they're very like feminist retellings of fairy tales, which is a lot of fun. So this one, it deals with Snow White, and actually the evil queen is the main character of the story. Yeah, I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Fair Catch by Candy Steiner. This is a sports college football romance. And this one is a brother's best friend, hate to love, roommates situation. Heroine has a twin brother, and when they were 16, her brother got into an accident, like a drunk driving accident, and he lost the use of his limbs from the waist down. And he was always like a really competitive athlete. Growing up, he wanted to become a professional football player. And so he makes his sister promise him when he's in the hospital that, hey, I want you to take on all of my dreams. So try out for the high school team, try out for the college team, because she has always played football, like ran drills and all that with him and his best friend. And so she decides to do that. So the story kicks to 2 years later, and it's college time, and she is doing practice for the college team. And it is her relationship with the hero, which was actually her brother's best friend, who was also involved in the accident. The heroine has always kind of held that over him, even though her brother remained best friends with him ever since. So then this one, they end up becoming suite mates, and so they have like their own separate bedrooms, but they share a common room and bathroom. And the hero is dyslexic, and so the heroine actually ends up helping him with some of his schoolwork and things. And all of that time together, they start realizing they kind of have some feelings for one another. So they start a sort of like secret friends with benefits situation. And this one was just okay for me. I didn't really feel like we ever got to know the couple really well. We do see the couple of Blindside make an appearance in this one, which for these 2 books in this series, I liked Blindside a little bit more. I have read actually 20 books from Candy Steiner now, and these newer books, they're not really my favorites from her. I really like some of her older, more angsty style books, but yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. Next, I read King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This was also featured in my mid-year book freakout tag as my biggest surprise of the year. This one is like a fantasy, paranormal, vampire romance. It came out last fall. It had been on my TBR from before it even came out. And then once it came out, I started hearing some like mixed reviews from friends. And so I kind of put it off to the back burner. But then I decided to jump into it recently, and I'm so glad I did, because I don't know if like lowered expectations worked better for me, but I just like loved this romance so much. So in this, the heroine is a princess, and her father's enemy is the vampire king. And so they have an arranged marriage situation because her father doesn't want this like army of vampires outside of his gates. And so he decides that to kind of appease that, his enemy will get to marry his daughter, with the secret plans of like the daughter going in and killing the vampire king. I really like this one. Like the plot could definitely use some work, but the romance, the whole like soulmates vibe that was going on with the couple, I just like ate it up and loved it. So I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read Hate by Tate James. This is the first book in the Madison Cate series. I've been wanting to read from this author for a while. This was my first read, and yeah, it didn't really work for me. This one is a reverse harem, so I definitely wanted to like this one because I do love a reverse harem. But yeah, I couldn't really get into it. The immaturity of it all just kind of wasn't it for me. Wasn't a fan of any of the characters or just the writing style. So I don't think I'll be picking up anything more from this author in the future, and I gave this one 2 stars. Next, I read Insta Crush by Kate Meter. This is one of the books in her Rookie Rebels hockey romance series. This one ended up being okay for me. I really should have read the synopsis because it is an accidental pregnancy trope, which, I mean, I don't mind those, but like when I picked this up, I wasn't really in the mood for that, so that kind of affected my rating for this. So the hero is described as a himbo hockey hunk. He is just like the most cheery, most delightful character ever. The heroine has kind of like secretly been crushing on him from afar, but she's like not a fan of hockey, not a fan of him, doesn't watch all of his live Instagram videos, none of that, you know, but then one day she meets him in person and they hit it off. But yeah, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I read The Culmination of Everything by Christina C. Jones. I got this copy from Hello Lovely Box. This is one of their special edition covers. I loved all the books I've read from this author, but this is probably my new favorite. This one, the heroine is a successful trauma surgeon, but she's going through some things. She lost her husband and their child, and so she just wants the time, takes a sabbatical from work, and wants the time to go and explore like her own mind, her own heart, and she takes off to Sugar Valley, this small town, like mountainside town. And on one of her first days there, she's hiking and actually falls and needs rescued. And so the hero ends up rescuing her, and he is like the grumpy park ranger, and he's like immediately turned off by her because he assumes like she was just up there trying to take selfies and like get the greatest like Instagram worthy photo. Like she can't stand his grumpy self either, but right away they have like super sizzling chemistry, and so she's like, hey, why don't we like turn this into something? So it turns into their like enemies with benefits situation. And this book does deal with heavy loss for both the hero and the heroine. They have some trauma from their past. But I just really loved this one. I loved the push and pull of the characters together. Loved the whole small town energy and all the characters. They definitely had me laughing at some of their like stubborn banter together. Yeah, this definitely does have some heavier content warning. So of course, death of a spouse, death of a child, death of loved ones. Hero also has some burn scars from a fire. And then it briefly mentions gun violence and school shootings. But yeah, I did really love this journey with the characters, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read an arc of Bright Like Wildfire, which is Juliet Cross's new contemporary romance. This one comes out on July 12th. So I love Juliet's paranormal Stay a Spell series, and this is her first small town contemporary romance. It's set in Louisiana, and the heroine is a high school English teacher. And on the opening of the book, she is super pissed because she's running late to work because the hero, Bennett, he just opened like a new fancy grocery store in town, and he's having like this grand opening, and so she is late to work. Kind of just can't stand Bennett. He is like from the perfect family. Everybody loves him. He can do no wrong. And she's just like over it. They also had a little moment in the past when they were teens. Like there was this whole glitter bomb catastrophe that she still blames him for. So yeah, they have some history. And the story starts that they're actually both participating in their local community theater. They're doing a production of Barefoot in the Park, and they both got the leads. So they have to spend a lot of time together. And I really loved this one. I loved the chemistry, like a little bit of hate to love moments, more hate from Betty, the heroine side, than Bennett. He like wants her from the beginning, and he just doesn't know why she hates him so much. I loved seeing Bennett fall for Betty first and just, yeah, want to prove to her that they're perfect together. Loved all of their acting moments and doing the whole like local community theater, and the steam and Bennett's dirty talk in this was just so good. Juliet definitely delivered on small town steamy times. So yeah, I can't wait to see if there'll be more characters from this story or this small town getting books in the future. And yeah, this comes out on July 12th, and I gave it 4 stars. So I read Hoops Shorts by Kennedy Ryan, a new novella collection part of her Hoops series. So both novellas in this were both previously published in other books. Full Court Press, one of the stories in this was originally featured in Hoops Holiday. Then Fast Break, the other story, it was originally in the Team Player anthology. The first one, the heroine is a sports journalist and the hero is a retired basketball player. Originally met 10 years ago, and then it is their like second meeting 10 years later, and their romance together. And then the second story, the hero is 40 and he is an NBA coach. So the heroine is a former world-class sprinter turned limb loss activist. And so she has like a fitness app, she has a gym, she is a bestseller, like she has all these different things going on. And so the hero is like super into her and wants to ask her out on a date, but she's like, I'm too busy, I don't have time for that. And so she kind of puts him off. So he ends up like following her across the country to some of her book events. And yeah, it's their romance and it was a super good time. Definitely with all of Kennedy's books, they have a definitely heavy emotional element to them with a lot of like past trauma that the characters work through. But yeah, loved this new collection and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I reread Man Down by Kate Meador. This is in her Rookie Rebels series. So earlier this month, I did a sports romance recommendation video. I had like 25 plus sports romance recs that I've read in the past year. And so when I was talking about this book, I was actually like, I really want to reread it. So I jumped into and reread this one. So in this book, the hero is a former hockey player. He took a break from the team when he lost his wife and children in an accident. And so the story picks up, it's 3 years later. He has been like for his own therapy texting his wife's phone number. So one day he actually gets a response from the phone number because the cell phone company has recycled her phone number. And so then it becomes his relationship with the heroine, who is the new phone number owner. So the heroine, she has a lot going on too, and they both kind of need like someone to connect to, that they like just want and need that connection. So they end up having a friendship via text for about a year. And they don't know really anything about one another, like besides obviously what they're both kind of going through. And so then because of like coincidental circumstances, they end up both in the same town at the same time, like almost a year later after texting. But they don't realize who one another is when they meet in person. So recently the heroine's estranged father ends up being put away in prison, and so she becomes the legal guardian for her half-sister. So she is dealing with all of that, and then her 12-year-old half-sister, she goes to hockey camp where the hero is one of the like coaches. And so him and the heroine meet that way. They don't get off on the right foot right away. They actually can't stand one another in person. And so they kind of had this like sizzling chemistry of like, we can't stand one another, but we also want to like rip each other's clothes off. Yeah, it's their story. There's definitely a lot of grief and loss in this one, with the hero having flashbacks of everything that happened with his family. And yeah, I just really loved this one and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I read Life After Wife, which is a new small town series from Amber Kelly. So like 3 or 4 years ago, I originally read this author's Poplar Falls small town series and really liked that. So when I saw she had a new one, I wanted to check it out. This book kind of features an entire like second chance at life, new beginnings, and new relationships for like the main couple as well as other characters in the series. In this one, the heroine at the beginning of the story, she's headed back to her small town hometown in Tennessee. She recently found out that her husband of 16 years cheated on her and has a new lady pregnant. She decides she's had enough. She packs up herself and her 12-year-old son and they head back to her mom's home. So they move in with her mom, and on the first day they end up meeting the hero, who he and his brothers and family have been taking care of her mom and looking after her. So yeah, it ends up being their super sweet little romance. And the heroine just has a lot going on. She's dealing with her ex. She's kind of trying to figure out this relationship with her preteen son, who doesn't really want anything to do with her. She's working through a complicated relationship with her mother. She's reconnecting with old friends. She's trying to find a job. Yeah, this one was super sweet, safe, kind of predictable. Like it was nothing that we haven't already seen or read before. Like it felt very steamy, but like Hallmark movie like. Yeah, at the same time, it was like exactly what I wanted when I picked it up. So I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I picked up The House Across the Lake from Riley Sager. So I really loved Riley's earlier books, like the first 4 books. I really loved all of those. So while I did like this book a little bit more than Survive the Night, it ended up just being okay for me in the end. It just didn't feel like anything new or exciting. It felt like so many other familiar TV shows and movies and other thriller books with like that unreliable woman narrator who's drinking too much, maybe seeing things she shouldn't see, you know, that whole like voyeurism rear window situation. And like, I get that that is a very popular psychological thriller trope for a reason, because it usually does work. On the other hand, it just wasn't everything that I wanted. There's also a bit of a something that happens at the end of this book, which I was actually kind of glad, because it took away from some of the other things happening earlier in the story. Then at the same time, I wasn't a big fan of the twist. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. So yeah, I just didn't really like how the last half of the story was revealed and kind of played out. Again, I gave this one 3 stars. But like, at the same time, I will still continue to probably pick up Riley Sager's new books just to try them out and hope that they give me that same feels as some of his earlier books did. Then I decided to give the Miles family series another chance, so I jumped into book 4, which is Hidden Miles. So I ended up skipping to book 3 in the series just because the hero that one was going to be focused on, I was not a fan of him in the entire series, so I knew I would definitely not like his book. Did want to try the 4th book out just because this has a scarred hero, and it is the brother's story that I had been looking forward to since book 1. Yeah, and this one, the hero is scarred. He was back from the army. He has like long hair and a beard now to try to hide his facial scars, and he hasn't left his family's property for 5 years, which is where he lives and works as well on the winery. But for the past like 3 or 4 years, he has had a friendship online with a girl that he games with. And so it ends up being their romance. They meet in person and really quickly realize that they're, each other's gaming friends. Heroine, she's actually trying to get out of a toxic, abusive relationship. So the hero actually steps in and kind of rescues her a couple times. And yeah, this one kind of fell into the same thing that I've had with the entire series, which it has a lot of telling instead of showing. I feel like we lose a lot of time that we don't get on page happenings with the couple and like the building of their relationships, which I really just wanted to feel connected to these couples. I feel like some of that time spent with the characters and that whole buildup would have been really helpful for the growth of the characters and their relationships. This one, there is a lot going on the side, and the romance just felt a little surface level. Yeah, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars, and I won't be picking up anything else from this series. I think I am just okay and done with it. So then I decided to continue on with the Sugar Valley series. So after the culmination of everything, Christina C. Jones has this book, which is The Point of It All. So this could definitely be read as a standalone. You will see like the familiar characters and the town again, but otherwise the stories don't really lean on each other. Just like in the first book, this one has definitely heavier elements and like more of an emotional journey. So in this one, the heroine is in her 40s and she's newly divorced and decided that she's always wanted to own a winery in a small town. And so she purchases the one in Sugar Valley and moves there. And then on her first day there, she ends up meeting the hero, and he approaches her and is like, hey, my grandparents actually started and owned that winery. Is there any chance you would be willing to sell it to me, because they raised me and I grew up there? And so she tells him like, actually, no, like this was my dream. I wanted to do this. I paid it in cash, but like maybe you can help me out since you seem to know like so much about it. So they end up working together as she gets the winery up and going again. This one I listened to the audiobook and got through it fairly quickly. I do wish I kind of knew the content for the book going into it, just because, yeah, I have some mixed feelings about this one. So this whole story revolves around cancer, and especially somebody choosing not to seek treatments or anything for said cancer. I definitely get everybody can live their life and make their own choices. And so I get that, personal feelings shouldn't really get involved because this is just a fiction book. But like at the same time, reading is a personal experience, bringing our own backgrounds and lives and all that affect how we rate and feel about books. This one was just hard for me to get around personally with just what was going on with the characters, but I still ended up giving it 3 stars. So I ended up reading No Tomorrow by Carrie Ann Cole. I have this really gorgeous edition from Mystic Box. This was also signed by the author and came with this really fun print as well. So this book is very, very heavy. I've heard a lot of good things about this one recently, so I wanted to try it out. Carrie Ann Cole has been a kind of hit and miss author for me in the past. I love some of her books and some of them have just not worked for me. And this one kind of fell somewhere in the middle, so I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. The subject matter in this book is very draining, definitely hard to read at times. Majority of this book is not happy, it's not a good time, and I really was not a fan of some of the things that happen in the beginning of this couple's relationship. Definitely like a lack of choice at times, and this whole just feeling of despair for the characters. It had a very like toxic obsession type of vibe for the relationship, which didn't feel healthy to me. In this one, I totally get why the heroine's family and friends were worried for her in the beginning. Like I was right there with them. Like, girl, what are you doing? I went in knowing what this book kind of deals with and how the ending is, and so I don't know if that really helped or didn't help my feelings for the book. That said, I do think the book got better as it went on. By the end of the epilogue, we have spent 21 years with this couple. So yeah, I feel kind of conflicted on this because while I liked the story and journey it was telling, I don't believe this was a romance. It felt very toxic. It was just not a very healthy relationship. So this is one of those books where I wish I could just reach in and talk to these characters or somebody to help them, because it's like there's all these red flags happening. How is nobody like trying to help this person in this book or like notice these things happening? Like there's explanations here. This one has a lot of content warnings. Let me see. There is homelessness, the toxic relationship, there's mental illness, there's depression, there is drug and alcohol addiction, there is loss and death of a pet, there is attempted suicide, and there is being in a relationship with somebody with a mental illness. So yeah, I mean, I did feel a certain way about the journey. I didn't really love it as a romance, so I think I ended up giving it 3.5/4 stars. Step, I grabbed the mixtape by Brittany C. Cherry. This one is also available on Kindle Unlimited with the read and listen feature, so if you download it there, you can listen to it on audio. So this one follows like a twin brother musician group. And the hero, he's one of the twin brothers, and his brother actually ends up passing away when he's 27. Where he deals a lot with the hero trying to move on from that grief and loss of his brother. The heroine is a single parent to a 5-year-old daughter, and she works at a bar. So one night the hero actually skips his own concert and is hiding out at the bar drinking and getting very drunk when the heroine spots him and kind of tries to help him. He not only skipped his own concert, but he's now in a room full of pissed off people who were supposed to be at his concert. And so he ends up getting into a fight. He's very drunk, and the heroine ends up rescuing him and taking him home. Then later on, when the hero finds out that the heroine lost her job because of helping him that night, he decides to go to her and that he needs to help her. So he decides to hire her as his personal chef. So this one, I have read a lot of Brittany Cherry books. This one is probably my least favorite. I think it read more women's fiction-y and not a lot of focus on the romance. So yeah, there's definitely some predictable parts to the story, I thought. I hated the entire situation with the heroine's family so much. Yeah, and there's just a lot of drama that I didn't think was needed for the story. So this one has content warning for substance abuse, depression, rape, blaming of a rape victim, and verbal abuse. I ended up giving this one 3 stars and thought it was okay. Next up, I grabbed One Fine Duke by Lenora Bell. I've been meaning to read more of her backlist. I've read her Wildfires versus Rogues series and has some fun ones in there, so I've been meaning to read this one. And so this one was actually a good place to start after reading the Wildflowers versus Rogues series, because the hero in this book, his sister is the heroine of the first book in that series. In this one, I loved how headstrong the heroine is. She's like a markswoman. She carries a gun with her at all times. She has practiced like spy coding and doing code breaking and all of that. She even customizes her own weapons. Her parents were kind of like spies, and she is trying to avenge their deaths, as well as wants like danger and adventure for her own life. She ends up meeting the hero. He is a duke. He's pretty reclusive because he was actually kidnapped and held captive for 10 days when he was a teenager, and so ever since then he has kind of just hid out at his country estate in Cornwall, but now he needs to travel to London because he is in need of a bride. I really liked their first meeting in this one. The heroine tries to prove to the hero that she is like anti-countryside, even though she grew up a country girl, because she's like, I don't want him interested in me, like I'm not bride potential. And so he, instead of being like insulted, he's actually like really a fan of her standing up to him and kind of pushing him and just her bravery. And so he's actually more intrigued by her. And so this one, they end up going on like a whole mystery spy moment together, which I think I've said before, spy espionage stories are not really my favorite. I didn't know this one dealt with that going in, but yeah, I thought this one was okay and gave it 3 stars. I read Scoring a Spouse. I read an arc of this one. It comes out on August 16th. And this is a marriage of convenience contemporary romance with a soccer playing heroine who also has rheumatoid arthritis. So in this one, the heroine has been playing professional soccer since she was like 9 years old. Both of her moms were also professional soccer players, and so she is trying to go into the World Cup. And she was also recently diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and she's trying to hide that from her coaches and other team players because she doesn't want it to be known and like that and for them to like make her quit the sport that she loves. One night she is at a hotel and the hero is there as well, and he has always been a fan of her entire career. So when he sees her there, he starts talking to her, and they end the night with him kind of jokingly telling her that he wants to find a bride because his grandma is passing away soon, and her lifelong dream was for him to get married. His grandma raised him. So the heroine decides, like, you know what, let's do this. Like, let's jump in, I'll marry you. And so they get married, and it ends up being their romance. And it has that fake relationship, but they're married. They're trying to keep things platonic, but you know, that ain't gonna stay. Family is a really big theme in this one. And yeah, it had some cute and sweet moments. I did want more overall from the story and the romance. Wasn't super pulled into these characters as much as I wanted to be. Yeah, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I read Rookie Move by Serena Bowen. This is the first book in her Brooklyn Bruisers series. I originally read her True North like small town series probably like 4 years ago, and it has a spin-off in there that kind of connects to this world, so I've always been meaning to get to this one, and this month I was just on a sports romance kick, and so I decided to finally pick this series up. In this one, the heroine is the PR person for the team. And this season, not only is her dad the new head coach for the team, but her ex-boyfriend, her only ex-boyfriend, is the new player for the team. They dated during high school, and she ended up breaking up with him and breaking his heart on graduation day. So these two, they never actually fell out of love. There was actually some trauma and some things they were dealing with when they were young teens that they were not just, you know, properly equipped to handle or deal with at the age that they were. So there's definitely still that love there between them. This was a second chance hockey romance. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I loved seeing the hero in this one because he is not that typical, like, overly confident and cocky sports player. He's actually trying to prove to his team and to the coach that he belongs on this team, and also trying to prove to the heroine that they should get back together. Yeah, I just really liked this one, and I gave it 4 stars and can't wait to continue on in the series. Then my last read is The Stranger in Seat 8B by Nikki Castle. This is her newest novella that just came out this month. Read 5 rounds and 2 fights from this author like back in January, and so she has quickly become a new favorite. So when I saw she was putting out this novella, I had to jump right in. This one, the heroine is on a plane and she's a lawyer. She's described as like this icy boss babe who doesn't take breaks from work. Like, even on the plane, she's working through emails and just trying to do everything that she never has time to do in the office. So the hero ends up being in the seat next to her. He owns a record label, and he tries to tell her that, like, his only thing on planes is, like, he doesn't do any work because, you know, this is his only time to relax. Nobody can reach him. Like, he can do whatever he wants. So he starts kind of talking and flirting with her. This one was really fun. He proves to her pretty quickly how much of a good idea it was for her to wear that skirt on the plane. So once their plane lands and Annie also comes down off of her high that she had in the clouds, she runs away. And of course, fate has more in store for this couple. There's actually a storm, so they can't actually get on their connecting flights, and the airlines end up putting them both up at the same hotel, and so they end up reconnecting there. The ending was a little bit abrupt. It kind of felt more like a happily for now situation, but I just loved it, ate it up, gave it 4 stars. Yeah, those were all my reads for June. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the ones that I read, what your thoughts were on them, or if there's any on here that you plan on picking up. I would love to chat about it. So yeah, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.